So this is the entire Q&A in one whole episode. If you think this is going to be too long for you to handle, it's almost 40 minutes. I did release it previously in 2 parts for those of you who don't quite have the attention span to sit through 40 minutes of content on YouTube. That being said, if you haven't seen it, then definitely stay tuned. We have a really wonderful Q&A with the director of Riot Girls, Jovanka Vuckovic, who I probably just butchered her last name, and for that I'm very sorry. However, the important thing is that you go follow up on the movie after this. Check it out. It is streaming currently on VOD as well as on some theaters. This Q&A is hosted by Dr. Rebekah McKendry, who, if you're not familiar with their work, you probably should be. She is an incredibly talented journalist who has worked with some of the greatest online as well as in hard copy magazines that we love in the horror world, including Fangoria. And she's also a director and writer of her own, who has done too many short films to count, including one that I starred in, Witch's Brew. I'll link it in the description box. And also her newest film, All the Creatures Restoring, was just released. I am so in love with the fact that they got Rebekah to interview Jovanka. I do think it's a wonderful pairing. Let's support women in film. And Rebekah is such a wonderful interviewer. It's one of my goals one day to be interviewed by her because I think she's so incredibly, wonderfully talented, and I just love her passion. That being said, I have followed Jovanka's career now for I don't even know, 7 years, years. When I started to pay attention to her, she was the editor at Rue Morgue, which is a Canadian horror publication that I love. I still do love it. So more power to her for doing that. And then at that time, I knew her from getting her start in the visual effects. And all my friends were like, oh yeah, she did visual effects before, and that's why she understands horror so well. And then everything I saw about her online, everything from her Facebook, and which she's deleted since, but she's still on Instagram and Twitter, I just loved her strength. I loved her character. I loved her ability to be so articulate and share her feelings and beliefs in such a professional manner, which is one of the reasons why I knew that I had to check out her film as soon as I possibly could, because I was really curious to see what she would do, and she did not disappoint. She has made several other short films, including The Captured Bird, which I believe was produced by Guillermo del Toro, and she also helmed XX, which was the first ever woman-based anthology, which is also talked about in this Q&A. So I'm going to stop talking. The important stuff is coming up in the Q&A, so definitely check that out. Thanks for watching.
And let's bring up the director, Jovanka Vuckovic.
We're very green.
The whole stage.
It's green.
Yes.
Hi.
So,
Hello.
this was amazing. So much energy and spirit, enthusiasm behind it. Can you start by telling us, how did you first become involved in the project?
Katherine and Lauren went to film school together in Canada, and I guess Katherine had written this script, and it was like 10 years old at the time, and I think they were like, they were trying to get it made, or Katherine was trying to get it made, and it kept, going to like male producers who like really didn't understand it, and kept trying to make it like the Hunger Games, and like cast it with like really good looking people, and like shoehorn in all these like steamy lesbian sex scenes and stuff, and which is totally not the movie that they wanted, right? So then when it came across, when they sent it to me, I was like, oh, I know what this is. This is like a fun kind of like culty kids adventure movie, like the ones that we grew up watching during the 80s. And
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's what I felt, is it's a kids adventure movie, but at the same time it has this incredibly adult Lord of the Flies-ish quality to it with some crazy violence. How did you traverse the two areas?
Well, I just said I didn't want to do it unless I could make it violent. Because I come from a horror background, and I when they approached me, I was like, "Are you sure you want me to do this movie? Because it's not going to be totally safe if you hire me, right?" And they were okay with it being R-rated, and they were okay with if it was totally up to me, I would have killed somebody every 10 minutes in the movie. But it just. We all agreed that that's the kind of movie that we wanted to make, right? So.
And on that note, could you talk a little bit about the effects? They looked mostly practical, including the major head wound and things like that.
Yeah. I wanted to do everything practical with visual effects enhancements. Mm-hmm. So that head we had one take of.
Focus branding when you have to do
We
it.
had one take and no resets, so if it didn't work, we would have been in big trouble. And of course, the sun, we were racing against the sun was setting, it was 6 p.m. and I still didn't have the head on set, and so we ended up pulling it off. So, and then I really pushed hard. I sent that shot back 40 times because I wanted it to be gross and the eyeball dangling and everything.
That's what made it for me.
Everybody loves the little details, right?
Yeah. Talk a little bit about where you guys shot it in the actual shoot itself, because it literally looks like you took over a whole town.
Yeah, we did. We took over the town of Parry Sound, Ontario. So
Yeah.
this little town in northern Ontario. They gave us Main Street, and we shut down Main Street, put a crane on there and stuff, and they were very warm and very welcoming.
Now the art, there was graffiti, it was all very anti-authoritarian, but were you able to transform over everything on Main Street art-wise?
Some stuff, we Greeked, and then other stuff was actually visual effects, painted on and tracked into the shot.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I have a visual effects background, so I'm horrible to work with in that way, because I will send stuff back over and over and over again until it's just right. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about casting. I think this is probably the fourth film I've seen Madison in this year. But Scratch, where did you find some of the rest of the cast?
They all auditioned. Yeah, they all, Scratch was one of the first people Paloma was one of the first people I saw after Scratch, and I really liked her, and we had her come back for a callback, and she tucked her hair up into a baseball cap and put it on. She had this great androgynous kind of look to her. I always, my read on Scratch was always that she was non-binary, and so when I met with her, she said the exact same thing to me. So we were like, that's perfect, and she just was perfect for it. And then Madison, had just did an amazing audition. And now she's been in Annabelle.
Yeah, she was in Annabelle.
And all these movies, and so they got to come up to Parry Sound and spend a few weeks just hanging out together and stuff. And so they got really close, and they were in Canada you can drink when you're 19, and so they had just turned 19, so they, so they went out they were like, this is great, I get to have they get to buy alcohol, and so they really bonded, and I think that helped for their chemistry.
And really they seem to kind of just evoke the punk aesthetic, even in just body language and things like that, and the costuming and everything. It was just so wonderfully infused throughout the entire film, including the soundtrack. Could you talk a little bit about selecting your songs? That soundtrack is just amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's all just stuff I was listening to when I was their age, right? So I was, a teenager in the 90s, so
Early Donna's in there.
Yeah, right. So it's all stuff that I was listening to at the time, and I was trying really hard to get a Minor Threat song too, and I came really close. I got to have some conversations on the phone with Ian McKay, which was pretty cool for me. Pretty cool, yeah. So, but it didn't end up working out. But yeah. So Girls' School and Joan Jett, and Joan Jett was pretty cool to be able to get that song for such a small, scrappy little movie.
I smiled at the L7 pin.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, it opens with an L7 song, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
Could you talk a little bit about the comic book aesthetic that you put over everything and how it kind of became your transitions, it really was infused through the entire thing? How did you pick the art and kind of decide where and when to put it?
I always, when I first read the script, I always thought this feels like it came from an indie comic from the 90s, like Tank Girl or something like that, right? And it was just an idea I had in my head, and then when we were cutting the film together, it just felt like it just needed it. And it was, it took some convincing, because, when you're sitting with an editor and you're like, okay, so I want to do a wipe here, and she's like, a white? White? And she's like, no, right? I promise it's going to be good. I promise. Just trust me, right? So it was just the easiest way to kind of tell all of that expository shit without having to have the character say it. Because like nobody cares about that scene where they say, remember when all of our parents died? That sucked. And, you know, like, so, so we just put it, I just put it in there, and we hired like a comic book artist who makes these really cool like indie and feminist comics and stuff to do the illustrations. So it just kind of worked. It helped it all gel together. Because the movie, like, it, you know, is important that it doesn't take itself too seriously. Because it's kind of ridiculous, right? Like the whole conceit, you know, is totally ridiculous. So I felt like if I did the Walter Hill thing from Warriors, if people would know from the very beginning to not take the movies seriously and to just like have fun, right? And then that's why nobody really gets too upset when we kill like an 8-year-old kid.
I still had a punch to it, but yeah, you move on a little bit.
Poor fish.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your major kind of filmic influences for it? Like, what were you watching at the time? I saw a nice Potter's Bluff reference, so well done there. But like, what else was kind of really influencing you?
So mostly movies like Warriors and Class of 1984, Night of the Comets. I made the cast and the crew all watch Suburbia and Over the Edge and those kinds of like youth and revolt movies, cult films, right? Because my hope was that someday that this would be a cult film, right? Because I knew it's not going to win me an Oscar. The thing we were trying to make is like a cult film, so like a B movie. So yeah.
Let's take a couple questions from the audience here. In the back, yeah.
How do you like have a conversation with an 8-year-old like, oh, your throat is gonna get slit? Like, what is the conversation you have with these kids when they're like dying?
He came in and auditioned. He had to audition that scene, so you know, he had to come in and like, you know, do that over and over again. Kids are very. They take their jobs very seriously, and they respect the craft of acting, and the best way to deal with them is to treat them the same way you would any of the adults. So you just explain the scene, and they just think it's so fun, right? I mean, we had a child psychologist on set, and all this stuff like, you know, we're supposed to do to be responsible, but the kids just love the violent stuff. They were fine. They didn't need to talk to anybody.
Yeah, right here.
What
Yes.
about the other kid, the one who provided them with the vehicle?
Oh yeah.
He was pretty cool.
Oh, Bacon!
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
It was
Bacon.
such a good scene.
Bacon
There's
is
so
one of
much
my
character
favorite-
packed in there.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Yeah, he's so great. Yeah, what's up, Scratch? What can I do for you? You know, he just came in and he auditioned. And he looked like he looked like that. You know, and he was like this little Italian gangster. You know, with like ears pierced, and I was just like, he's perfect. You know, I think everybody wants like a Bacon sequel.
Spit off.
Yeah, you know, Scratch gives the poor guy the purple nurple, the titty twister, or
Which
whatever
was-
it's called.
It's great because that was such a child way to enforce torture.
It is.
And there was a lot of that throughout where it was kind of like how an adolescent would perceive kind of, you know, going after torture or creating power. It was a nice move.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think I made them do that, and I had to ask his mom. You know, because, well, you know, I could say, is it okay if she grabs him by the nipple and twists it, right? It's going to be fake. She's not really going to touch his nipple, but she's going to pretend, is that okay? And his mom was like, yeah, no problem. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Do you think there's going to be a sequel?
We never conceived, of a sequel for this. I mean, I think that we're all surprised it actually got made, because in the very beginning, we got a lot of because it was written by a woman and produced by a woman, directed by a woman, and the two leads were queer. We got a lot of who is this movie for? And we were didn't understand that, people who didn't get it, right? And there were people that kind of wanted to ghettoize it as it's a queer film, and we're yes, but the world needs more of these kinds of movies where we just like, you know, their queerness is like ubiquitous and we don't need any explanations for who these people are. So, right? And it was such an uphill battle, and primarily because a lot of people who were making these comments were just like, you know, cisgender, straight white guys, and they were just like, I don't understand, you know, and so we thought it's a miracle that the movie got financed at all. So we haven't even thought about a sequel. I'm glad that people are asking. If I did one, I mean, I would love to see just a whole movie of just Nat and Scratch. Because like we see, I mean, the screenwriter really wanted to have this equally balanced gang movie where we saw the same amount of both sides, but I really fell in love with those two characters, and I just would love to see more of them and their journey.
Yeah, I want a Nat and Scratch Road movie.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
bacon.
Just like more them in the car, and, you know.
With bacon.
With bacon.
With bacon. And nobody cares about sewing it.
Like the Joe Pesci.
Since you mentioned the two equally balanced game, you had such strong aesthetical choices for both of them, how the east side and the west side look so dramatically different aesthetically. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, kind of how you prepared those, even just the color palettes were remarkably different between the two?
Well, yeah, it's just like it's a class struggle, right? The poor kids on the east side of the bridge, and you know the rich kids on the west, and so you know, even before the apocalypse, the east side would have been, you know, more of a blue collar area, and you know where Nat and Scratch were from, and so it was easy, you know, to just do their stuff in exteriors and try to, because we had $3.5 million, which is not a lot of money. So, you know, we didn't have a lot of money to like do it as an urban apocalypse or something like that, and that's part of the reason why we chose a small town to do it in. And so it was, you know, everything on the west side was orderly and authoritarian and clean and all Titan colors. Everything is yellow and blue, and then the east side was just more chaotic. You know, it was just sort of an easy choice to make.
Other questions? Yeah, right here.
So how did you finally get financing for a queer,
I know.
you know, female-led, female-made, you know, cult film?
Primarily from the Canadian government.
Woo!
Go Canada, yeah. So a lot of the money came from, we have like a really extensive grant system in Canada. Some came from, there was some US gap financing and stuff like that, but a lot of the money was put together by the producer, Lauren Grant, through using, you know, applying for telefilm. And what's great about telefilm is they're like they're the national film body, and they finance a lot of like small independent films. But in my case, I was part of the national program, which means like they gave me more money historically than they've ever given any other woman to make a movie outside. Yeah.
Congratulations.
I know. Which was really, really cool. And I think that, you know, they were trying to make a difference. And they're talking about gender parity and all this stuff, and, you know, and trying to you know, give more money. And here we are with this project, you know, written by a woman, directed by a woman, produced by a woman, starring two queer characters. Like, they're, you know, they could see that what we were trying to do in terms of representation and making movies that make a difference.
Awesome.
Yeah, so they stood behind us, which was great. Yeah.
Any other audience questions? Okay, so where can we find this and see this? Any others?
No, any other questions? No, there's
Oh,
a
wait,
few brave
there's a
people.
few.
There we go, yeah, yes.
How about Jessica? Oh, sorry, right there.
What's
Hi.
the
Yeah, so
Yes.
I love the whole like Karate Kid vibe.
Sweet
Like,
delay.
I mean, I
Oh
was
my gosh.
cracking up. I didn't know I was gonna be laughing. It was amazing.
Yeah, I know. Todd is just such an asshole.
Oh, he's so good.
The
Yeah.
lack of sleeves
So good.
for me.
Yeah, no, he came in, the kids were great. So Paloma came in, I said, can I shave your head into a mohawk? And she's like, sure. And that kid, he had like long hair, and I was like, for you it's gonna be a mullet and frosted tips. And he was like, okay, yeah, he was totally down for it. And sorry, what was the question?
Coming up with this, like, the music, I mean, the whole thing when you're developing, like, that part of these characters, that kind of gang where it was kind of like 80s, like, Karate Kid vibes, I love. Was that something you thought about or even intended?
Well, on the none of that stuff was on the page. So when I pitched my version of this movie to them, it was like, I want to do it, but set it in the 90s and have populated with all this kind of music that I grew up listening to, and I had sort of an idea for how the girls should look and everything. And so I brought all that kind of style stuff to it. But then, the Todd and being the Karate Kid reference and stuff, that's all Katherine, that's all the screenwriter, she was kind of like, just nodding to those kinds of movies and those kinds of goofy fun characters. So a lot of the humor in it was her, because I'm a horror person, I'm not that funny, Right?
I saw a gentleman in the hat right there. Yeah.
Oh, what's next?
Oh, I'm probably gonna go back to my horror roots and make, a horror movie next. Very, very likely. Yeah, I have a few things in development. One is a feminist thriller about a woman with terminal brain cancer who has to kill 5 people in order to save her own skin. So she sort of like destroys all these different types of toxic masculinity that are encircling her. So we're going out to cast on that right now, and the other one is a really, really hyper violent horror movie. So I moved back into that space because I had to restrain myself on this movie. I had to really calm down because they, I really wanted to put so much more violence in it, but the girls were just like, no, we don't want to make that kind of movie where it's just like a big blood splatter fest, right? I'm like, okay. Again,
I was wondering what your advice would be to upcoming filmmakers who want to make their first feature.
It's taken me 10 years to make my first feature, and I made a bunch of short films and just kept, working my ass off, and I just kept going, and I refused to give up, and actually, I should thank Lauren because she took a chance. She insisted on a woman filmmaker for this, and she could have just given up and said, okay, well, we went out to a few women and they weren't interested, so, or whatever. But she insisted on it being a woman, and so, sometimes it takes, I really believe it takes women to help other women, or else no change is going to happen. Yes.
Can you speak a little bit? You worked on the anthology film XX with a bunch of other female filmmakers. So obviously working with female filmmakers is important to you. Can you speak a little bit about why that is the case and also the difference between male and women?
I co-created XX. I created it to create jobs for women where there were none. So it was because nobody was hiring women to make horror movies, and all these anthologies were coming out, and all the women were being passed over for jobs, and so me and Todd Brown got together and said, let's make one where we just invite women to participate, and so it was just like directly arose out of a lack of opportunities for women, so like I'm doing my part to try to make change happen, and that movie did very well. It played at Sundance. And it's Magnolia's highest grossing film that they've ever bankrolled.
Whoa.
So that tells me something. And Raquel and I are developing it as a TV series. So hopefully we'll be able to, instead of doing a sequel to that, we think it'll have more of a life on television where it could just be like an anthology that sort of like would be very comfortable on the same shelf as Black Mirror and The Handmaid's Tale. So these sort of elevated horror stories made by women, written by, directed by, and starring women in the lead roles. That's great. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, see, there's lots of questions.
I know, lots of them now.
Now it's a conversation.
Yeah.
Being so close to the Los Angeles LGBT Center, have you ever thought about
I parked outside of there today.
Anita May? Yeah, the campus. Have you ever thought of like releasing it to show at the Village, the Renberg Theater?
I would love to. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I have to ask the producer about. But yeah, we'd love to. We want to get it out to as many people as possible.
The campus recently just opened, so there's like an immense amount of young queer people who would like love to be able to like take insight from this kind of movie. I have several friends that are currently living there right now, and like some of them are actually doing filmmaking. One of them just finally came out with their movie. Where it was three dominatrix that are trying to steal their trans boyfriend because they're in a polycule relationship, his testosterone back. So, and it's really cool because like they just released that movie, right? And it's like super cool to see my friend, my housemate who I used to live in the program with, kind of just go off to do these cool things. Like to see your movie play at the Renberg Theater and just be able to inspire so many young queer people who are like, shit, that's something I would do. Like, you know, like the scenes of like the rape scenes more specifically. I know myself as a trans man have experienced things like similar situations. So having that kind of like satisfaction of seeing.
I was never going to let you get away with that.
Thank you.
Out of everyone in the film.
I think we don't need to see any more rape in movies, man. Especially not like movies like this. Come on, man. Yeah, right? I would love to have that happen. Yeah, and I think it's really cool that like, even with XX, we that project was open to anyone that identified as women, and we tried to get some trans filmmakers involved in it, and so for the series, there's a trans director friend of mine who pitched this awesome idea about a woman who was in LA, who's a werewolf, right? And she's super pissed because whenever there's a full moon, she turns into a werewolf. The curse doesn't respect her transition, and she becomes a male werewolf. And I love this idea so much. So, and like, this is what happens when you like invite everyone to the party. Right, and you invite everyone to tell their own stories and stuff. You get all these amazing new storytelling possibilities emerge that we haven't seen before, particularly in the horror genre, which, as much as I love it, is historically male-dominated. And it's hard sometimes being a woman horror fan because women are used in such destructive ways, right?
Have you seen that starting to change in the time since you've been so engaged in horror?
Yeah, I have, because there's more women writing and directing their own stories, and we're like looking at, either writing our own or looking at scripts and going, yeah, not having the rape scene, fuck you, like women are in charge, and we're getting to be able to get rid of all that kind of gross male gazy stuff that,
It took a while.
It's part of the reason why we made XX is because me and Todd was walking out of the theater after the sequel of I Spit on Your Grave 2, and he heard a couple of bro dudes in front of him complaining that it wasn't rapey enough. Right?
Wow.
Right?
That's awful.
Right? I know. So there's a small but very vocal, and they always are the loudest, these people, small but very vocal community of people in the horror business, that the horror community, that they think that they represent all of us, but they don't. So it's nice to kind of reclaim it. And that's part of my career goal, is to redefine women in the genre spaces, right? Yeah.
I think I saw one more question right there.
Yes.
Hi, I loved your movie.
Oh, thank you. I love your hair.
My mom.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Do you feel like you can personally relate to Scratch? Like, do you think that there was a moment when you were creating this film that you felt like you had that fuck you moment to the societal norm where you
finally like decided to kind of go against the grain and
Oh,
do something.
Absolutely,
So what
absolutely.
was that moment and like what inspired you in that way?
Well, Katherine, who wrote the screenplay, is queer, and so she scratches her. But you know, when I read it, Scratch and Nat reminded me of me and my best friend when I was growing up, and you know, we were kind of like outsiders and mercilessly picked on because we didn't fit in, because we were too weird, too punk, too queer, too poor, too everything, right? And so I found a way into the story through those two girls. There's parts of Scratch that I relate to because I, you know, also have this very fuck you, kind of like sometimes, you know, tough persona. But Scratch also has a soft underbelly too, and there's parts of Nat I relate to as well. You know, she's a little bit more the level-headed one of the two. So yeah, I wouldn't have done it if it was a Romeo and Juliet story. I did it because it was a Juliet and Juliet story. You know, I think we need more of those.
I love that you slipped in the boyfriend as well. Like I thought that was really like just as somebody that does identify as they them, like I
Oh,
really
you mean when
appreciate
she says, "Oh, I know that's so
yeah, I mean like
mean,"
without
I
actually
know.
saying the pronouns argument, like you kind of slipped that in there and really that was cool.
Yeah, Katherine wrote that because she knew it would be hurt. It would hurt a lot to say, you know, it would hurt a lot. So it was like literally the meanest thing that she could say to Scratch.
Definitely a punch.
Yeah.
The top two favorites
I'm sorry?
Your top two favorites
Oh,
are
this was so hard. People ask you.
Mine changes every week. Like, if you ask me tonight, it'll be different from what I would say right now. It changes
I
constantly.
know, it's just so hard because there's like literally I could give you a list of 100 horror
just
movies
a
that you have
couple
to see.
that
before you
inspired
go.
you recently.
Oh God. Okay. I guess, you know, if I had to be stuck on a desert island and I can only watch one movie, it would probably be John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a perfect movie.
Really good.
And it's funny, I picked a movie that has no women. All men, and just like apart from that cheating bitch computer,
Well,
it's all.
we don't
it's
know
all-
what the thing is, so well, it could
We don't know
be,
how
it's more
they
yes.
Yeah, right. That's true. Exactly. We don't know how the thing identifies.
Yeah, it doesn't identify the movie, so we'll claim that.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough question. I could write a list of 100, and I have. I've been asked to write a list of 100 before. Anyone else? Yeah. I see you.
Oh wait, is there one more?
Yes, I
I'm
do.
staring into greenness. Yes, right there.
Hi. Oh God, I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be. You can't be more nervous than me. I hate talking in front of people.
Was it hard to get all those like Reagan youth songs on it, and also like what I guess you already asked what your favorite horror movie was. I guess like horror movies that really like what got you into the genre of horror. I guess is my second question.
So the first question is, those songs, he's just all about money. And in the case of Minor Threat, they don't care about money. I had to talk on the phone to Ian Mackay for a long period, like 3 times. And in the end, it was a vote, and the band said no, because they just don't care about money. So, but the other ones, it's just about like, you know, reaching out. They're all on labels, and it's not about the band. You could know someone in the band, and you still have to pay $45,000 to the label.
So
So
there's still only like 4 labels representing those punk bands.
yeah,
and
they're all
they
on like.
could like give a crap who you are. They just have
They
a
don't
rate.
care. Yeah, they don't care. You just pay the license fee, and all the license fees are different depending on how you use the music. So, if in the case of the Jump Jet song, it's in the movie. They're singing along to it. You're going to pay more for it, right? Than when it's on the radio or in the background or something like that. As for horror movies, it's a really personal question. I had a really hard childhood, and I was a very lonely kid, and so I was a latchkey kid too, and I spent a lot of time by myself, staying up late at night, watching whatever was on television. And you know, back then in the early 80s, they would put like after 11 p.m. it would be like blue movies and horror movies, uncut horror movies on TV.
Oh,
So horror movies were like my friends during some of my most loneliest periods of my life. So they had a huge effect on me. And like, even as a teenager, I, just obsessively, I would watch horror movies, and I started riding motorcycles when I was 15, and I spent a lot of time in my room reading comic books, and I didn't have a lot of friends, and I would have like killed to, have somebody who would come over and watch horror movies with me, but it's just not the kind of town I lived in. I lived in a place like Potter's Bluff, where most of the people there were assholes, so.
Except for me.
This lady knows.
Except for me. I was okay.
Except for you. Oddly enough, on the way here in the car, she's like, "Oh, I grew up in that town. We know somebody in
We went to the
common."
same elementary school and the same high school,
Yeah.
but
Oh, really?
no, I'm older than Jovanka, so.
That's still,
And
that's
her
pretty fucking
friends
amazing,
can
'cause you
vouch
both turned
for
out fucking strong ass women that I
yeah.
love dearly, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I didn't let any of that shit hold me back, right? Yeah.
Right here.
It's funny because you talk about like paying more to license certain songs, but also how you guys did not have a massive budget. So when you were making this, like, how did you decide where to spend your money versus where to scrimp and try to save and be cheap?
This is kind of a boring answer because it's just about producing. Like $2 million of the budget went to labor, which means paying everyone, the crew, and then $1.5 million was left to put on the screen. So it's like there's not much left, and so you just try to, the producers try to allocate the budget as best they can to the things that we need the most. And
I guess
Yeah.
when we're thinking like artistically though, like how did you decide what made you decide like, oh no, I want to pay that extra coin because that song is very, very important.
oh,
Things like that.
yeah, well, we knew we wanted the Joan Jett song, and so we paid the most for that song,
Mhm.
right? And then, after that, it was like kind of, $5,000 per song or whatever, and so we
Were
just
there any
sort of,
like splurges in terms of other, like, was there an effect that was more expensive, or was there something like that?
yeah, the cars aren't cheap, like the car stuff is kind of expensive, and yeah, practical effects are actually really expensive.
Yeah.
I remember when I made my first short film, we paid $14,000 for that puppet, the monster thing.
Which is
in it.
gorgeous, but
The
yeah.
animatronic puppet, we paid $14,000 for that, a short film.
How long did it take to set up the headshot? Like usually it's not even just that practical effects are expensive, it literally becomes your day.
Not in my case, I had like 10 minutes to do it, so
Wow.
I had to get it or else I wasn't going to get it at all, so, yeah.
impressive.
You know how it is, you've made a couple of movies.
Yeah. But yeah, practical effects are incredibly expensive, and it would have been a horrible pain to reset that. So yeah,
We just
Got
wouldn't
it
have had
once.
it, we would have been screwed,
yeah.
so.
Okay, one last question back there, and then they're going to cut me off.
Sure. My question is, was there anything that you ended up having to leave out or on the cutting room floor that you wish you could have included?
Good question.
Everything is in the movie. Everything I shot is in the movie because we had 23 days and I shot everything that was on every page. And then we ran out of money. and then it was like there's no reshoots. So like I'm like, okay, well if we get any notes, there's not much I can do about them. we can edit, we can try to fix some stuff in editing, but if you tell me that you want to see more, scenes with Nat and Scratch, which I would have loved, we're not getting them. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's independent film for you. But yeah, everything I shot was in there. Maybe there's like a take or two or whatever, but
Well, hopefully we'll get those on the release. So, and speaking of which, because everyone is going to go tweet and talk about Facebook and everything, tell us where we can see this and where they can all tell their friends to go see it.
Well, it's in select theaters and on demand. However people watch, so like Vudu, iTunes,
VOD.
Amazon Prime or whatever.
Fandango now.
Sorry? Oh,
Fandango.
Fandango now, says the distributor.
Is there a particular hashtag that you guys are using for the movie that we should make sure everybody uses?
Just Riot Girls and Riot Girls Film. Yeah,
Yes.
people are using.
Please go support, talk about it. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Please keep Dan and Scratch alive. I love them. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this Q&A as much as I did. I'm going to put the link in the description box below where you can watch Riot Girls or find out more information about the movie and then acquire it as you're able to, depending upon where you live. Definitely feel free to follow Jovanka and her film on social media, as well as Dr. Rebekah McKendry, because they're really wonderfully talented women in film, and we need to love and support them in hopes that more of their vision gets released into the universe. That was a really hippy-dippy way of saying support. It's really helpful. I also do think they're really great, wonderful, talented women in film, and I can't think of a better thing to support for myself anyways. So that being said, also, if you feel like supporting, hit the like button down below and subscribe. I produce new videos over here on this channel constantly as I'm able to. And also 10 billion bonus points if you join the Patreon. A couple bucks a month gets you early access to the episodes, signed swag, Google Hangouts, and more. So join us. It's a fun little group of horror nerds. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye.